Hey everybody, Whitney Wonka here, and welcome back to another episode of the Willy Wonka Master Bedroom. Now, with only 2 kids left, it's probably not hard to figure out that today we're going to talk about a TV watching, pew pew shooting, disrespecting little boy named Mike TV. I have a lot in store for you today, so let's get started. Well, when it comes to Mike TV in the Willy Wonka Master Bedroom, I honestly couldn't have planned this better. It just seems fitting that the TV in the master bedroom would, of course, represent Mike TV and Wonka Vision. So what I'm doing here is I started off with an unfinished television. I do have a couple of these, I think, still in my eBay store if anybody is needing one for whatever projects you might be working with. The unfinished one is really great because it does come with the TV screen, and it comes with a couple pieces of hardware, and it also comes with like a little velvet red insert because it's really meant to look like an old school late 70s and early 80s big box floor television, which it'll be perfect for what we're going to do today. So how I envision this TV is to look much more like the one that we actually see in the white Wonka Vision room. It's the one where the chocolate appears and also where Mike TV appears later. It's this very sleek silver television, a lot of black, and a little bit more modern knobs. Of course, this was super modern for the time when this movie came out, of course. So I obviously want a lot of the elements that we're seeing in that television onto the one that I'm going to work on today. To kind of give this TV a slicker look and a little bit more modern look, I'm not going to be putting in the hardware on the side of the door panel here. What I'm going to do instead is just go ahead and fill that in with some wood fill and let that dry. And while that's drying on the outside, I'm going to go ahead and paint the whole interior black. And I will not be putting in the red velvet piece either, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with that here in a bit. Now, the young man who played Mike TV, his name was Paris Thiemann, and he was 11 years old when he was cast for the role, and he was the youngest of the group of kids, actually, and so according to the book, they did treat him quite a bit younger. I think at those ages, 2 years different is huge. Even at 11 years old, he had already done quite a bit of acting, including Broadway, and he had been in some commercials like peanut butter commercials, Jif Peanut Butter, actually. There were very few people that the director auditioned for this role. Once he saw Paris, he just really felt that he had that perfect kind of bratty quality, and he just loved him for the role, and so that's how he was cast.
Sure, I do. You photograph something, then the photograph is split up into millions of tiny pieces, and they go whizzing through the air down to your TV set where they're all put together again in the right order.
You should open your mouth a little wider when you speak.
For the next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paint all the black spindles that are on the front of the television. And this is really just to help them blend in, because what I want to do is take a popsicle stick and just cut it down and glue it to the front and get rid of that spindly look, that traditional look, and bring it into a more modern vibe. So I'm going to cut down that popsicle stick. I'm also going to paint it black, and then I'll glue it to the very front of the television. And then what I'll do once it's all dry is I'm going to go ahead and add some modern turn knobs and little buttons, kind of like how we saw in the movie. Now I want to move on to the body of the television. Now, of course, I'm going to go ahead and paint it in a silver, but sometimes it's very difficult with silver paint to really show up as very metallic. I have found some of the Martha Stewart metallic finishes to be some of the best, but I still do recommend doing a base coat. In this case, I'm doing a base coat in just a regular like apple barrel acrylic gray called Elephant Gray, and I'll do that first. Then I will take a brown paper bag and sand it. I'll do another coat of the Elephant Gray, sand it with the brown paper bag again, and then do 1 and 2 coats of the metallic paint if necessary. It's recommended to sand with the brown paper bag over regular sandpaper because it just really gives it a nice smooth finish without really wearing down the wood. Also, if you have a really great or favorite brand of silver metallic paints or just metallic paints in general that you like to use, feel free to put that in the comments so others can learn from you. Let's talk about the fun set. So this is another set design by designer Harper Goff of the actual TV room, who also designed all of the rooms for the movie. And he just loved the idea of this all white, crisp, clean room that had this illusion of no way in, no way out. And in fact, when they were building the set, he really made sure that the doors were incredibly hidden. So much so that the director, while on set one time, could not figure out how to get out of the room itself. So I thought that was pretty fun. One of the fun things about Paris is that he was in some ways very close to the character that he was playing, and that he was, obviously a little boy. He was a little bit mischievous, and sometimes he got in trouble on set set. One of the times that he did that was in the inventing room, where in the movie we actually see him sneaking a little taste of something. We see him put something in his mouth. There's a loud bang. He falls backwards into some of the set, right? The pots and pans, he falls down and his mouth is smoking. Well, in real life, he actually lifted the lid off of the beehive that is in the inventing room, and one of the bees came out and he did get stung by it. And so they thought it was funny in that life was imitating art, but he was okay. And I don't even know if they thought about having a bee allergy, but he didn't have any issues, so thank goodness for that. Now that the wood fill is completely dry, what I want to do is just go ahead and paint the entire front of the television all black, just so it can be as close to the one that we're seeing in the actual movie. Now, really only two things appear on Wonka Vision, the 70s original, and that is basically the Wonka bar and then Mike TV. So I thought it would be really fun if we went ahead and staged a Wonka bar inside the television. I printed up a original Wonka bar photo from the internet and cropped it down, and then I just added it to a piece of, it's like a remnant cardstock piece to make it a little bit thicker. And then I have two pieces of, I don't even know what they are. I've used them in a couple different products because I came across them in a craft lot, and they're like little round pegs. Anyway, I've glued two of those together to give some height, and then I glued the Wonka bar right on top, and then I glued the entire piece inside the television. Unfortunately for whoever lives here, they're not going to get a lot of stations on this television, but I think it's going to be hilarious for us to see this television inside the master bedroom. Now, I also want to replicate the little keypad that we see in the bottom left-hand corner of the television, which I'm sure has little knobs and buttons and all sorts of stuff on it. And so I'm just taking a piece of wood, cutting it down to the right size for the size of the television. I'll be painting that in a white, and then I'll be adding just some jewelry bits and beads to simulate knobs and buttons. And there we go. Our TV is completed. Well, hi there, Tiny Whitney. I thought that I might see you pop up in there today. I'm a little disappointed. I mean, do you even watch the movies about the rooms I'm creating? I mean, if you had, you maybe would know that this is a very dangerous situation that you're in now. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how tall you are right now, but you should be at least 5 inches tall. Now I'm probably gonna have to send you to the taffy room too to get stretched. No, don't look at me that way. You did this to yourself. You are always such a little turd. You're always getting yourself into shenanigans that I have to get you out of. I still love you. Now the TV is going to go underneath the window, but it's going to go against the wall. That's the inventing room wall. I did know that I was going to have the TV and Mike TV represented in front of that window, so I did leave the underneath area of the window white and I didn't touch it. And then what I'm going to do is put some drapes around the window to also represent the white room. Now, because there's so much going on in this room, where I can have a little continuity, I am trying to keep within that. So what I'm going to do for the drapes is I am going to do white drapes, but I am going to use the same fabric that I used for the bedding and also for the tabletop for the violet table. It's got a little sparkle to it, basically. It isn't like a true plain white fabric, which is fine. Then I have this orange ribbon. When I saw this immediately, of course, I thought that it would be perfect to attempt to replicate the little suits that they're all wearing inside the Wonka Vision room, the television room, which of course are these white jumpsuits with the orange stripes going up the sides of the suit and then of course along the arms as well. Basically making a valance covering a piece of this, I called it cardstock earlier, but it's actually an insert that came like in a packaging. You know, I tend to keep that sort of stuff because I know I'm going to use it some way in a project. So I'm just wrapping the fabric around that. So that's what I'm going to kind of mimic with the curtains. I'm using a combination of glues for this project. You can see my hot glue to hold it in place while my fabric glues and my tacky glue dry. And then I'm also using a fabric stiffener in the end. I also sprayed them with a little bit of starch and ran the iron over them just to give them some really nice solid creases before I hang them up. Of course, I'll hang these up before I put the television in the room. we have 3 versions of Mike TV. All are very similar, but the book version actually talks about that he's very into gangster movies. And of course, they're very violent. And he actually talks about the fact that he has no less than 18 different types of weapons that he carries with him at all times. The 2005, the Tim Burton version, which of course is much closer to the book, has him being a gamer and he's super into violent video games, but he's not really carrying anything with him. The 70s version, of course, how can it not be your favorite if you love the series? He, of course, is very into not just television, but he's really into westerns. And we see him first on screen. He's got his little blue gingham and his red scarf and his cowboy hat. But then for the duration of the movie, he's wearing a yellow western top with some white fringe. He has a fringe jacket on just in the beginning. He has like a turquoise scarf on and then a white cowboy hat. And that's really what I want represented in my little master bedroom here. So I thought it'd be fun to create some of those items that he's wearing, and then I'll just have him sitting on top of the television. And because let's not pretend that all of us don't have some clothing sitting out in our bedrooms right now that should be put away, but they haven't. If you're guilty of that, go ahead and let me know in the comments. I certainly am. So what I'm doing right now is dyeing some fabric. I really didn't have any yellow and turquoise fabric, and I really didn't feel like going to purchase, a large quantity of it and have a whole bunch of it left over. I didn't have white fabric either, but I have this material right here. I don't even know fully what it is, if I'm being honest. It almost feels like an industrial towel, but it's better than that. I'm sure that it was part of some packaging that I got. Again, hoarder, okay? So sorry. But that's what I'm going to use. You can just use regular fabric. So I've cut it down and I'm using regular food dye to dye these. Now, right now they are super brilliant in color, but once I squeeze out the fabric and let them dry, they're going to be a much, much lighter. And here is my 2 fabric pieces now that they are all dyed and also dried. And you can see how much lighter they have become. So now I'm just cutting out a piece to fold, so it will look like a folded shirt sitting on top of the television. And then I'm just cutting out a very small piece of the turquoise fabric that will be folded to make it look like a handkerchief. Now what I want to do for the fringe is use real string, but I want to be sure that I'm doing it correctly or staying in as close to a straight line as I can. And I will be actually using real thread, a needle and thread actually. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, your jaw is probably on the ground right now because you probably thought I didn't even know what a needle and thread was. But I'm using a colored pencil right here to just make some markings so that I know where I'm going to actually sew on the fringe. All right, now that I have sewn in the fringe, and because I don't really know anything about sewing, it's going to be hard for me to explain to you what I did. I just looped it through on these very loose loops, and then once I was done with that, I cut it across to leave the fringe. And now what I'm doing is I'm just adding a little bit of white glue underneath the fringe to keep a lot of it down, and I'm using a toothpick to separate out the fringe so that it kind of lays flat on the shirt. And then if there were any pieces that were uneven, I went back and I cut them. For the buttons, I'm just using these very, very, very tiny little beads, and I'll be just gluing them right down the front with my tacky glue. For the collar and the handkerchief, I thought I was going to get away by just using that handkerchief that you saw me make, but it really didn't look right because I need to make it appear that it's kind of up underneath his collar and poking through the front. I cut 2 additional small, thin pieces of the blue fabric and I tied them together and created a knot. And then I cut a piece of the yellow fabric to simulate a fake collar. I glued the collar on, put the blue knot to the front, and then folded the collar edges over it. So from the front, it looks like that handkerchief is kind of coming out, and you can see the front of the handkerchief. And then I took the original handkerchief that I made, which was also slightly too big. I cut it down into a smaller little triangle, and then I glued that on the back. So now it looks like it's actually going around into the front of the shirt. And I'll just go ahead and lay it on top of the television for now. That is probably where it will end up, but we'll see. I also want to make a hat, and since it's just going to sit around the television and not be wearable, I'm just going to make it out of polymer clay, so it'll be more like a prop piece. So I'm going to start off by making the top portion of the hat. Now the hat that we see him wear is a little white cowboy hat, but it isn't really shaped like a traditional cowboy hat. It's more like a little one of those vintage felt hats that looks more like the one that Woody wears in a Toy Story. So I'm going to try to make it look more like that. So I'm starting off by just creating the top part of the hat, putting in a little groove with some of my polymer clay tools here. And then for the base and for the bottom of the hat, the rim and all that, I just rolled out a little bit more white polymer clay. And then I used actually the bottom of a light bulb to get the right round size that I wanted. And then once I had that in place, I put the top portion of the cowboy hat on top and then just tried to create that cowboy shape with the rim of the hat. Once I felt comfortable with how that looked, I went ahead and baked it. And then when it came out and it was cooled down, I just took a little sandpaper and sanded the edges to give it a nice smooth shape. And then you can see that there is a white trim on Mike's hat. I didn't have white, but I had black. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to it. And as I started adding the black, it started to remind me more of the Lone Ranger hat, which I almost kept it that way just because I thought that was pretty cool. But I didn't. I didn't keep it that way. I went ahead and once the glue was dry, I went ahead and painted that black trim so that it was white, which is just like the one that Mike TV wears. And there we go. His little outfit is pretty much done. I'm not going to add anything else to that, except I do have one of these little tiny Western guns right here that I'm going to go ahead and add to his outfit. And so now his little outfit's just waiting for him to get up in the morning and get dressed. I imagine that's how his mom would have laid out his clothes for him anyways. So the last thing I want to make is like, I don't know, like a TV tchotchke. Is that a thing? I know with these big box televisions, we used to have something on top of them that was like decorative. And so I thought for this one would be really fun if I had a tiny Mike TV after he shrunk. So I found this little guy right here. It's just a little plastic, small scale little human. He's made out of like a blue plastic. I'm going to go ahead and paint him white. I want to make him look as though he's wearing the little white suit, of course, when he gets shrunk down. Now, technically, he would be about the size of the side of the Willy Wonka bar, and I'm not going to go that small, but I'm still going to go pretty tiny. Once he's nice and coated, I'm going to add a little bit of this bright orange so that he can have his little stripes on all sides and his arms. And then I painted his little face and a little hair sticking out. And basically that's it. I sprayed him with a little sealer so that the paint wouldn't chip off and then put him on top of the television. Okay, so I guess my mini Mike TV wasn't really the last thing I made. I really did want to do one little thing to kind of give a little nod to the Tim Burton film and a little bit to the book. And so because Mike TV was so into more violent gangster movies, and then in the movie he was into violent games, I did go ahead and I found a 3D print of a little PS2. I chose the PS2 because the movie came out in 2005 and the PlayStation 2 came out I think in 2000. I'm guessing that would be the gaming system that we're seeing him playing in the movie. Anyway, I went ahead and painted that up after I printed it, and then for the wiring I just used a threaded garden wire and painted it black. And then that is it. That is the last thing that I made for the Mike TV portion of the Willy Wonka master bedroom. Now it's time to add the new pieces to the room, which just means installing the curtains and adding the television and of course the new PS2 also. Oh, and look who's back to her normal 5-inch tall size. Little tiny Whitney, and you're watching television? Anything good on? What? Let me see. Oh, yeah. I like that channel. One of my favorites, actually, if I do say so myself. Which reminds me, if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do so that you don't miss any future content. As you know, we have one more trial to go. We will be working on Charlie Bucket in the next Willy Wonka video. Beyond that, I still have several more elements actually that I want to include in the room that I think that you're going to find incredibly fun. So if you liked today's video, definitely give me a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comments. I always love to hear from you. Hope you have a great rest of your week, you guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye!